Hi, good morning. This is Brett from Energetic Arts, and welcome to another open Q&A training session. Um, we've got some questions that came in through the week today. I think I'm going to read them all out for you. There's 4 questions. I'm going to read them all out, and then we're going to look at maybe addressing the questions individually, but also as a whole. Okay, because there's some underlining frameworks here that we can work with to open up the mind and to start to change some perceptions or give you some options for perceptions, and also show you maybe some inroads to other dimensions to perceive your reality from. Okay, so before we go into this, I know there's a lot of people that will take things very literally, and if it's not working out for you, or if you're having problems with it, then some people like to blame others for what goes wrong or what doesn't go right. And so what I want to do is just say that, take this with a grain of salt. I take poetic license as an artist with all of this information. And if you're having any problems, and you're struggling, reach out. Don't suffer in silence. Get support from wherever you can. If you need professional help, then definitely seek professional help. If you're having trouble and where to look, you can always go to our preferred practitioner page on energeticarts.io and get some of the people there that have been practicing helping people move from one point to another, and get their support and their expertise and their experience, and merge it into your own. But at the end of the day, this is all there just to provoke thought into different directions and take points of view that you maybe perhaps never have before, and to make up your own mind. Because at the end of the day, I want you to be a master of your own life and your own mind, and to be able to live reality on your terms. When I say that, I mean don't do anything stupid, obviously, or don't hurt anyone, don't hurt yourself especially. But this world, I think, is here. It's like a bit of a high-tech virtual reality game that we can participate in to manifest and experience all our dreams and goals and desires and all that sort of stuff. And there's plenty of room within the social norms to be able to experience lots of cool stuff. And there's plenty of safe spaces outside the social norms that are going to enhance your life and people's life around you. A good example of that is all the stuff that is happening now with electronic cars and alternative energies and that sort of thing. Typically coming through in the 50s and 60s and the 70s, that was all science fiction, and that was outside the social norm, and now it's becoming social norm. And it's going to change the world in ways that we can't imagine. So just a little example. So the questions today, I'll just read them out, and then we'll sort of break it down a little bit, and I'll show you my process a little bit. So the first question is, how does ego play a part in manifesting, whether it's good or bad? Should ego be used to manifest? When your mind and body are vibrating, what can one do to take advantage of it? And finally, this question goes in sort of 2 parts. It's when in a dream state and you have a conversation with someone, did you create both sides of the conversation? And the second part is, or did the other person participate in the conversation? So this is really interesting because it really brings us to sort of the edge and the tipping point of going between, you know, being in this reality and thinking of it as you inside this body, and your external world as being separate from you and not part of you, and something that you have to deal with, and maybe, you know, it's pleasant sometimes and hostile at other times. And you know, it's just one of those things where um, it implies a separation. Okay, so as you go through this and you realize that, okay, this separation that's implied also implies a connection, that everything is also connected, and that we're all one thing. Okay, so from there, let me just do this. Just pause for a second. There we go. Just have to deal with this 1 second. Excuse me. Okay. So when we're talking about ego, there's a lot of stuff going on in, you know, in self-help and all that about ego, not ego manifesting from higher self, and, you know, manifesting from lower self vibrations, all this sort of stuff. Um, but we sort of, you know, to participate in this game, we need to have an ego in terms of, you know, the game piece, the character that we come and show up as. And so, you know, don't get caught up too much in this duality. You know, this is the whole thing that these questions are pointing towards, is this duality where, you know, there's you inside this world that's external to you, and that, you know, you're having to, you know, fight with or oppose with. And that's not, you know, that's part of the illusion, that's part of the game. You know, if you were just always realizing that it's all you all the time, that, as Alan Watts would say, would become an insufferable bore. And so what he says is that, you know, if you want to know what's happening inside your mind, all you have to do is open your eyes and look around, and everything that you see is what is going on inside your mind. And so what that means, to me at least, is that, you know, if we look at the scientific principles behind things, and we go, okay, we know that the brain, or the brain is an enclosed box, and we have these imports, or these ports going in, which is the five senses: the eyes, the ears, the nose, the mouth, or the, you know, the taste sense, and the touch sense. And what we know is that these are filtered through the brain, right? So every time you see something, we know how this works. Light comes in through the eye, gets inverted, it goes back into the visual cortex. It goes in as like ones and zeros encoded, and the brain converts that code into whatever it is that you see. And so we also know that the information out there, it's pretty much infinite, or at least the potential of it is infinite. And depending on what we're focused on depends on what we are going to see. And so the ego, in at least from this point of view, is how the mind is configured to tune into what parts of information or what potentials in that infinite field it chooses to hone in on. And that's what you get in terms of your reality. And so, it's not a question of, is everything connected, and are we manifesting from higher self or are we manifesting from ego? It's kind of both at the same time, because hey, good to see you. Good to see you made it. Cool. So when we're talking about manifesting, from ego, from not ego, it's that it in itself is a construct that we want to move beyond. Okay, so I don't know if anyone's seen the film Being John Malkovich, but it's there's this scene where John Malkovich goes through this tunnel and he comes out into this room, and everybody is him, and they're all just saying his name, Malkovich, Malkovich, and he like freaks out because it's like it's all him, right? And it's this crazy moment where he's like, what the fuck is going on? Because it's so overloads you with this mirrored effect. It's like this kaleidoscope of yourself, okay, and it reacts instantly to whatever you're doing, and there's like no time delay. So you to be able to control that in terms of pilot it, requires a lot of skill at that sort of level. So what we do is we start to filter it down and, create limitations for us to only focus on a certain amount of information, which is, handable and manageable by our mind, our, personality at the time. But what we're wanting to do is move beyond that personality, okay? And we're wanting to be more blended with what is already going on. So, for example, just to ground it a little bit, um, there was a period in my life where I was studying lucid dreaming a lot, and the idea is, you want to wake up in your dream and you want to take control of the dream or yourself in the dream and start to do things that you normally can't do in waking life, like, fly around or teleport from one point to another, or bring certain characters into your dream, or have certain experiences in your dream, or go to certain places in your dream. And so you start doing this and you start practicing it, and you get little successes here and there, and you start having these experiences of maybe flying through the sky and levitating off the ground, or, you know, uh, beaming from one point in time and space to another, or to communicate with certain people and get certain information. And what I realized after doing this for a while is that I'm still creating all this from a mind that has been configured from my past. And so what I wanted to do then is I wanted to go, well, what's outside of the edge of my mind? Because that's what's most interesting now, because you get all these experiences, you go, okay, I did that, I can do that, and I've done that, and this is all cool, but it's not as exciting as it was when I first started. And so what's beyond? And so what you want to start doing then is you want to start tuning in to the higher mind, or the less limited by the ego personality limitations of the mind, and start moving into that greater mind, that larger space. And so what happened then is, while I would wake up in the dream and I would realize I was dreaming, I would allow the dream to unfold however it did, because I would want to see what was going on in the subconscious and what it was trying to show me. And so when we're talking about manifesting from this level, it's almost like you're not actually manifesting anything. You're allowing things to unfold so you can see what this greater self, this higher or deeper connected part of you, is actually wanting to do. And so, to put it another way, when most people get into this work and they want to start manifesting and they want to get into spirituality and all that sort of stuff, they're really doing it because they want to get something out of it. Okay, they want to create more wealth, they want to create better relationships, they want to move to a better house, they want more career opportunities, whatever it is. And so they're really doing this from a personality point of view, and which is fine. I mean, that's okay. We do that anyway. Even when you go up the levels, you still come back down and to do this because you want to create an environment that's peaceful, that has enough resources where your body can be sustained in a particular state, so you can jump off from there into these unknown spaces and not get disrupted, distracted, or thrown off course, or interrupted. So we begin to let the dream unfold, because the mind that we're wanting to tap into is already everything. Okay, there was this joke that came out on Facebook a while back when Prince Harry got married, and they were talking about his bachelor's, his bucks night, and they said that awkward moment where your best man is pulling out dollar bills, to give to the dancer, and it's got your nan's face on it, right? And so, most of us are trying to acquire all this money, manifesting in so to speak, in the beginning. But from a point of view of, the royalty, it means nothing to you because you own it all already. Okay. It's like, when the in the, what is it, the King's Speech, when he goes to the speech therapist's house and he says, "Do you mind if I come in?" And he says, "Well, it's all yours anyway, so of course you can come in." It's this weird inverted sort of thing where you don't really need permission, or you don't really need to create anything because you already own it all. And so the game is flipped on its head. And so when you're manifesting from ego, so to speak, it implies that you're not it and that you're separate from it. And, it's like you play this little game with yourself of perhaps scarcity. Let's put it that way. But when you come from that greater mind where you are it already and you are everything already, then your priorities and what you value shifts dramatically. So it's like if your face is on the dollar bill and all the money that everyone's using is yours anyway, then you're not interested in acquiring money anymore because you've already got it, right? And so when we're tuning into this higher mind, at least from my point of view, personality point of view, I'm trying to understand what it is that it's wanting for me to understand. And so I don't just sit there going, I'm either, if I create this, then I'm successful, and if I don't create it, I'm not successful. I'm going, okay, well, if this is, because some things I can manifest really easily into my life. Like I don't even have to really think about it. And, like we had the example the other day, you know, it's not difficult for you to, you know, manifest a Volkswagen going past, or to have, you know, perhaps you've already done it, right? And it happened very quickly, because it's one of those things, it's sort of a throwaway to you. But when it comes to things that aren't manifesting into your life, it's like, well, why aren't they manifesting? And, you know, it's like, from going back to, you know, Prince Harry's point of view, why does he need, you know, why would he bother manifesting more money when, you know, his family is on the money? So, so we want to tune into this higher mind, and what is it actually trying to do? What is it trying to show us? And so when you're talking, what was the other question about the person in the dream? When you're having a conversation with someone in the dream, you know, did you create both sides of the conversation? Well, in terms of what I was talking about there, yes, of course. But the self that created both sides of the conversation, you know, is sort of unseen, it's unknown. So, how do we get ourselves into a point where we can tune into that mind? And so, this is what, you know, why we meditate and why we do these exercises. It's so we can tune in and get those parts of the brain working, and the nervous system all tuned in, so we can start to tune into those new signals that are always there, but perhaps we're not tuning into them and tapping into them for whatever reasons. And so when we talk about doing the work, the great work, you know, the mystery schools talk about the great work, it's not so much about getting anywhere, because you're already there. It's already there. You're already it. But it's like, well, how do you tune in to become more of it when you're playing this game with yourself of not being it, right? So, like I said, just before when we started, you know, Alan Watts says, if you didn't have this illusion of separation, life would be this insufferable bore. You know, imagine for a moment that you're everything and you know it, and everything everywhere you look is all what's happening inside your mind. Okay, and there's a very real possibility that, you know, you're not actually here, that this is all some virtual experience. You know, maybe you're just this star hovering in space, and you've been there for billions of years, and you've evolved your awareness to create this world inside your mind. And so you're experiencing it from, you know, you've gotten so good at it that you're so wrapped up in it that you think it's real, and it has become real because that's your experience. So from here, you know, and if you're the only thing in the universe, and you've played this game to split yourself off so you can interact with yourself, so you can keep yourself interested and evolving forward, learning new things about yourself, then you get to the point where, you know, it becomes sort of like, well, so what? And so then you start to create all these little things to, you know, detach yourself from yourself so you can rediscover yourself. And so you end up playing this game of forgetfulness. And so what I see is that we've gotten so deep into this forgetfulness that it got so out of hand that, you know, we created this sort of nightmare existence. And then now we're starting to pull it back and go, okay, well, maybe that was, you know, we did that. That was fun for a while. And then we got a little bit tired of it. And now let's start doing some other things, you know. If we can go down the rabbit hole that way, then it implies that we can go up the rabbit hole the other way as well. Because bearing in mind that this duality, this game of duality, is maybe just part of the illusion as well. So, like Alan Watts says, up implies down, inside implies outside, self implies other. And so we're in this mindset, whether we realize it or not, that we're so entrenched at this positive and negative polarity. But reality is that it's two sides of the same coin. Okay? So, we have this bias of like, this is good, that's bad, this is right, this is wrong. But depending on the context, it can flip, it can be the other way. And so it's not so much about one way or the other on these polarities. It's about maybe shifting frequency and raising it up. And so, and as you raise it, the polarities become closer and closer. And I think this is maybe part of what this pyramid structure is meant to imply also, is that you transcend the hierarchy of positive and negative. Okay, because there's that old saying that some people tell lies to tell the truth, and other people some people use lies to tell the truth, and other people use the truth to tell lies. So you can see how, depending on where you're coming from, the method and the polarity can flip on itself if you know what you're dealing with. Is this making sense so far? You still following? And so this brings us to the third question, is, when the body is vibrating, how is it worded? When the mind and body are vibrating, what can one do to take advantage? So for me, what I understand from this is that when we're vibrating, we're in a state of flux. Okay, just like when you download a new update on your computer, it has to reset and reboot and then restart, and all this stuff happens, and it starts making all this noise, and the fan goes on and lights start flashing and whatever. And then eventually it settles down back to normal, but you're updated, you're upgraded. And so I think the best way to take advantage of these moments is to really relax and give yourself as much time as you need to let that process complete itself. All right, you don't want to interrupt the downloads, because then you're going to have to go through it again. And then once you've done that, to come out of it and to take your time and get used to the new configuration. So if you've ever had a deep tissue massage, for example, and you've had all that tension come out of you, and all those knots and blockages get released, then you start to feel a little bit awkward, a little bit what's the word I'm looking for? I keep slipping out of my mind. Uncoordinated. You feel a little uncoordinated. You need a bit of time to reconfigure and tune into your new settings, and get your body back into, get back into the driver's seat. So another way of putting it is, I remember going to a chiropractor once and getting my neck was out because I'd played roller hockey for years, and every time, you get into the center of the rink, or center ice we'd call it, you get hit and cleaned up, and it was like getting hit by a car, and your body gets all put out of alignment. And if you don't see to that, then you start to adjust into that misalignment. And then, so you go to the chiropractor and he puts you back together, readjusts you back in a line, and all of a sudden you feel like your head's on tipped on the side, but really it's straight now because before it was like that. And so now you have to reconfigure and get used to this new setting. And so that can take a few days. And especially when you go through these big shifts, you want to give yourself time to adjust. So when I was doing all these workshops overseas in different countries, time zones with different people, I would take a few days to acclimatize to the new place that I was in, settle down, get relaxed, do the workshop, and then I'd take a few days afterwards before I moved anywhere. And I would see people come in, flying in last minute, jump straight into the workshop, do the workshop, and then fly out, before they'd even had a chance to adjust. And what I noticed through, keeping in contact with some of these people is that they had a hard time acclimatizing. All right. So they would, I'd call them crashes. They would have a crash when they got home because they were trying to stay in alignment with their old lifestyle and their own frequency. And of course, once you've updated and changed your frequency, everything starts to flux and change around you. And when it's in a state of flux, it can be very confusing. And, in some cases, it can become traumatic. So we don't want to do that. We want to allow things to flux and change and settle down. And once they've done that, then we can start to move into our new frequency and our new environment and see what the difference is and what the advantages are and what the disadvantages are of being in that new frequency. And make no mistake, there's positives and negatives to every frequency. So this whole idea that, once you get to this new frequency, it's all going to be positive, that's an illusion, because you remember we're moving up the scale. And yes, they say that there's a part where you move into, there's a threshold, a bridge where things become, not positive and negative anymore. They become unified. But that comes with a whole new mindset of unification. Is not just, everything's one and blissful, because sometimes everything's one and not blissful as well. So in that unity, you have the choice to move through the spectrum however you want, and find the balance depending on what you're doing and where you're going and who you're being. So I hope that went in, because when we're in this new area, this new consciousness of unity, things cease to be positive and negative as such, although physically there is a positive and negative polarity to it, but it's still all seen as all part of the one spectrum, and it's not seen as good and bad as such. It's seen as whether it's useful or unuseful depending on what you're trying to do. And that brings me to another point, is when you're talking about useful and unuseful, depends on the mindset you're seeing it from. So I'll be getting into this in the Tuesday session, the Monday, Tuesday session coming up. This is more into manifesting again. I'll just bring up the title, because I can never remember the titles. The greater mind's interpretation of your manifestation. Okay, so sometimes we'll see from our personality, let's say ego, personality is a similar thing, point of view. When things happen to you, you're going to see them as good or bad. But from a greater mind's perspective, there's no good or bad. It's all leading towards the next thing. Okay. So I was listening to Alan Watts again. If you're not listening to Alan Watts already, you should check it out. He's incredible entertaining philosopher from the 70s and 80s, I think it was, or probably earlier. And he tells a story, you know, the Zen master is trying to convey this point to people, you know, students in his audience. And so he talks about the Zen master in the village who, you know, his horse runs away. And everyone says, "Oh, how terrible." And he says, "Oh, maybe." And a week goes by and the horse returns, and it brings with him 7 wild horses. And so now he's got 8 horses. And everyone says, "Oh, how wonderful." And he says, "Maybe." And then, you know, a few days go by and the Zen master's son is trying to ride one of the wild horses and gets thrown and breaks his leg. And everyone says, "Oh, how terrible." And he says, "Maybe." And, you know, a few weeks go by and all of a sudden the army marches through the town, and they're conscribing all the young men for the army. And so obviously they don't take the Zen master's son because he's got a broken leg, and everyone says, "Oh, how wonderful." And he says, "Oh, maybe." So you see, the point is that you don't know from your personality where this is all going and what's in the future that's unfolding for you. And so often these terrible things that happen to us, or these things that don't manifest for us, you know, at the time we can rack our brain going, "Why isn't this happening? What's wrong with me? Does this work?" All this sort of stuff. But from the greater mind's perspective, you know, it might be steering you onto a much better path. And so what you're really truly desiring, even from an area that your egoic personality, your you know, small-minded consciousness doesn't understand yet, but when it shows up for you, then you're like, "Oh, that's what I really wanted. That's what I was really trying to manifest. I'm glad all this stuff that I thought I wanted didn't happen, because I would have been trapped in that you know, reality, and I wouldn't have known how to get out of it." And so, you know, it's like, you know, another way of putting it is, you know, you hear about, you know, everyone wants to win the lottery. Like, "I want to win the lottery." And then you hear the people who do win the lottery, especially these young guys, they go out and they buy themselves a Lamborghini, or they buy, you know, this super sports bike, you know, this R1 1000 or something like that. And within a few weeks, you know, because everyone's going to sell you the bike, and everyone's going to sell you the car if you got the money. But then within a few weeks, they get into a terrible accident, and they either, you know, cripple themselves or they're dead. And then it's just like useless. Okay. So, what I have learned in my experience is that the things that come to you because that's what you're ready to receive. And when I talk about being ready to receive, it's like a skill level ready. And so it's almost like, here we are in this body, this mind, this bioenergetic system, this living biological machine that is just so incredibly designed that it does all these things that we can't really understand yet from a conscious level. And thank God all these unconscious things, this unconscious greater mind is taking over, because we'd have no idea how to manage and regulate our heartbeat and our blood flowing through the veins and the lymphatic system draining away toxins at just the right time and just the right amount, and all the chemical releases happening in the brain to keep us in a state of calm and not being in pain every time we move and all that sort of stuff. And so, you know, we see this happen with people who are addicted to drugs, and they have they have drugs where it acts as a painkiller, and then they're putting themselves into this state of bliss all the time, and then slowly the body becomes more and more tolerant and stops creating its own natural painkiller, and then it becomes dependent. um, and then so and then you have this person chasing around this external painkiller, because they've lost the ability to unconsciously do that and automatically do that. And so coming back to Alan Watts again, he talks about the Zen master saying, you that when your belt is right because it's so comfortable you don't notice it. And so there's a lot of these processes that are happening unconsciously from a greater mind perspective, and they're happening in the background and you don't notice them. And it's a good thing that you don't notice them, otherwise they would take up all of your awareness and it would just drain your consciousness, just like the person who's addicted to pumping themselves with painkillers is only focused on the next time that they can get to the painkiller, or managing their access to it. And so we want to be able to tune into this mindset, not interrupt this greater mind from doing what it's doing, but maybe tune into it enough so at times of when we need to do something, maybe we can alter it, or maybe we can realize that maybe it knows exactly what it's doing, and that we should, like in the lucid dream, maybe we should just follow along with the dream and see where it's going, because it's leading us outside of the mind, from the past that we're perceiving our life through, and it's showing us a new way of being, a new level of life where we don't have to worry about all these things that so many people are caught up in. So, is this helping so far? Are we starting to tune into that unity consciousness that I'm talking about? I mean, you're starting to see that it's not this fluffy thing. It's more of an abstract, way of looking at things. What does it mean you're in a constant state of vibration? It means you're alive, for one. um, cool, everything's resonating. Good. So we're always vibrating. This is the thing. We're not vibrating, right? At least on this plane, we're vibrating. Okay, and we're doing it so fast that we appear to be solid. So, even science is saying now that atoms, or, quarks, bosons, whatever, these tiny little bits of energy, right down to the Planck scale and whatever, at that bridge, are popping in and out of existence. Okay, it's like ones and zeros in a computer, on, off. And these combinations make up certain patterns. And so you, me, and in our bodies, this is information vibrating in a certain pattern at a certain frequency. And so what they're discovering also is that, through changing the frequency and vibration, they can levitate things. They can do this now in laboratories where they're, levitating little polystyrene balls through sound. There's, things to suggest that when you can change this frequency of things, they become less solid, and they can change their structure. When you're talking about, the singer who sings at a certain pitch and breaks the glass. The frequency of the glass and the frequency of the pitch are matching, and that changes the structure of the energy pattern holding the glass together. So when you're vibrating, it means you're changing your signature. This is what I understand, at least, is that you're changing your frequency, and you're moving from one frequency into another, or you're moving from one dimension to another, or from one reality to another. So when you're, sitting there in meditation or lying down in meditation, and you start to feel that vibration, your heart starts pounding, and you start to feel the energy start to flux, vibrate, and shift and change around you. From what I gather, is that you moving from one dimension across many, maybe into another, sort of like beaming, Star Trek, beaming from one location to another. But instead of so much location, because that would be teleportation, that's something else, we're moving from one dimension to another. And like I said, in this multi-dimensional reality, there are probably millions, or if not billions, of realities that appear exactly the same as the one that you're in, only with very slight variations in them. And so when we're shifting through these timelines, we can direct them through our personality, sure, our ego, to get certain things happening. And remembering this is our game piece in the game. So you need to be able to do that. But then there's also another level playing out where you're going along with the story of the game. Okay, so imagine a video game. You can control your character through the game and to do certain things, and that's part of it. But then there's also this underlining story that unfolds. And this is sort of, at least in the video game context, it's pre-programmed, it's out of your control. But it's still going in the direction that you want, which is the end of the game, and to build up your skill level as a player playing the game. So from that point of view, then you can also see that all the money you acquire, all the objects you acquire in that game are meaningless, because it's just, ones and zeros. It's just code inside the game. So another way of putting it is, I remember my cousin, who was video game crazy. Like, he would just spend hours and hours and hours playing these games. In the beginning, it was all about getting, especially the car driving game, because he was close to getting his license. It was about getting the next car and winning the races and blah, 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 blah. And he played this game so much that he'd acquired all the cars and he'd won all the races many, many times. And so then when I went to see him one time, he was obviously playing again, but this time he was just exploring the map. He was playing, he was doing whatever he wanted to within the game, and totally ignoring whether he was winning or losing or what car he was using. He'd be using different cars for different specific tasks that he'd made up for himself within the game. So does this start to land a little bit for you? So we've sort of opened up many, many loops into this area. And I want to make sure that you can now access, and you're starting to get a feel for what it feels like to be in this higher mind, this unity consciousness. And so also, another thing that recently opened up, cool. Another thing that just recently opened up, which I was introduced to a long time ago, funnily enough, but obviously didn't have the awareness to be able to really absorb it and understand it. So I got led to the Tao Te Ching, and understanding about the Tao, and in there it's all about effortlessness, you know, um, and so many things sound very paradoxical and abstract from a perspective of not knowing. But when you do know, like I said, when you have the key and you understand what it's talking about because you have experienced or at least touched on the other level, you start to see that they're very direct, for lack of a better word, truths that when you hear them, you go, oh, yeah, I get it. I understand that straight away. That makes sense now because I've transcended that other level, you know. So that's something I encourage you guys to check out. Um, so I'm just going to pause there for a second. I'm going to open it up to you again if there's anything there. I know I go in there and I sort of give you the fire hose of stuff. But is there anything that you wanted to hone in on, focus in on, that you wanted to really sort of look at a bit more in detail from there? And so the other thing is um, the Tao. Yeah. Well, with the Tao, I mean, this is old stuff. This is ancient stuff. And same with, you know, some of the philosophers that have come in the past. They spent a lot of time really, you know, thinking about this and going into this and experiencing all this stuff. And so a lot of this is already being worked out, you know. And the other part, just like what I'm doing here and what they're doing there, is that they're directing you towards something that is ineffable, right? Of course. All right. So this is yeah, in the comment, I just watched a movie named Tao yesterday. It's funny you bring this up. So this is what I'm saying. Is that this greater mind is trying to come through and lead you towards things, and when you're ready, it's like, yeah, awesome. Try this, try that, you know, and it's constantly putting things in front of you. And if you can relax and, you know, go in that effortless, that not controlling it and just sort of going along for the ride, um, and, you know, keeping yourself into a place where you can be ready to receive that next level, whatever that level is, you know, then it's going to keep giving you more and more. And the opposite side of what, you know, everyone wants more until they get this. It's like the sorcerer's apprentice, you know, they get the buckets going. It's like, yeah. And then, you know, it starts to overflow and it's like, oh, how do I stop this? Okay. So this is, you know, this is where the balance comes in. And if it's automatically unchecked, you're going to lean towards, you know, cutting it off, because like I've mentioned before, when you tap into these higher currents, these higher frequencies, not only does the frequency become faster, but it becomes the payload is much greater. Okay, the capacity is much greater. And so when we're talking in terms of, say, computers, right, it's like going from dial up to ADSL to cable to, you know, optic fiber. not only does it become faster, but the bandwidth becomes larger and larger. And if you're not ready to receive all that, um, then it can be very stressful on the body, mind, personality, ego. And so and I've had this experience. It's not only um, I'll read that comment in a minute. It's not just about getting the information, because you can be inundated with it, and it can just pile up and hoard around you. But then if that happens, you get this other problem, which is like, okay, I've got all this now. What do I do with it? How do I unpack it? Now that I've unpacked it, how do I use it? Now that I'm using it, how do I master it? And so, um, acquiring is not the be all and end all. What I've found is that sometimes less is more, and sometimes just honing in on the basics and what's absolutely necessary, and the basic tools and traveling light is sometimes the best way to go, depending on what you're doing. Yeah, that's a good point. So the movie you saw was about AI, and AI wanting more information on being human. And so from what I gather from this is where we moving from just using the intellect, just using intelligence, and going beyond that, because you know you can know everything intellectually but not understand anything experientially. There's a big difference. And I've seen a lot of people who are acquiring intellectual capital. They're building up this bank of intellectual property. And it's like, I've got I've been to all the workshops, and I've done all the programs, and, I've got all the CD sets, and I've got all the books, and I've got it all, but they're not actually using it. Okay, um, they think by buying it or attending that they're going to acquire the mastery of it. It's not like that. I mean, how many people have you seen? Um, they go out and they buy a home gym, and you know within a year it's for sale again, because they never use it. And because they never use it, they don't get the result that it was intended, that they were wanting. So they think by buying the equipment, I'm going to get the results. Like, no, you actually have to use the equipment. And if you know how to use the equipment, then you don't even need equipment. Okay. You can use, to use the metaphor, you can use nothing but your own body weight if you understand the principles of what it is to use your body in a way that's going to get you the result. So this is why the training sessions were created, is to start to train in this, practice this, experiment with all this stuff. Don't just take it on, become a passive listener. Apply this to your life. See if it works. If it works, great. If it doesn't, great. Why does it work? Why doesn't it work? And once you've acquired or understood the principles behind the techniques, behind the tools, then you can become a tool maker. You can use anything can become a tool. It's like the saying, in the hands of a master, anything can become a weapon, because you understand the principles of how things get applied and why they work the way they do, to whatever degree. All right. So the other part is, going back, and we'll finish up with this as we're coming up to the hour now, is that just come from a place where you already understand this and you're already connected with this to whatever degree, okay? It's not about getting to a place of understanding or getting to a place of connectedness. You already are, okay? You already understand a lot. You already know a lot. You've already experienced a lot. You're already connected to whatever degree. But maybe we're talking about escalating our degrees of connectedness, escalating our degree of understanding of experience, and that sort of thing. All right, so hope that blew your mind in the right way. We'll leave it there. We'll see you at the next webinar on coming up on the greater mind, the manifestation of the greater mind, or greater mind's interpretation of your manifestation. We'll go deeper into this. But what I would like you to do is I would like you to start seeing if you can operate from that place of non-duality, okay? And if you're, if you need any more sort of prompting, check out Alan Watts, check out the Tao, and also follow your own guidance, whatever the greater mind is trying to lead you towards. And then hopefully, next time we meet, you'll have a bit more experiential understanding of this. And once we get there, then we can keep going further and further into the field. So we'll leave it there. Thanks for joining in. I know you're coming in from all hours of the morning or evening and all over the world. And if you find this of value, bring people along, send them to the webinar link, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks for joining, and have a great day.